Okay, everybody, we're going to get started. The plan is we're going to have a panel discussion for about 30 minutes, and then we'll quickly do some closing remarks between Charlotte and I, and we will still get you to Stanley Picker by 5 o'clock with plenty of time. I think we can do it. I'm going to start with the second question first, because I think it came across in a lot of your, sorry, a lot of your presentations, and then I thought it'd be interesting to expand on that a little bit with some of the keywords. So the question I'd like to maybe start with is for curators, educators, or institutions who want to work with artists from supported studio contexts, what could a responsible starting point look like, particularly in relation to assumptions about authorship, decision-making, and agency? And then I also just want us to be thinking about, I thought the concept of Charlotte talking about risk was really important, and I'm guessing could probably relate to a lot of different perspectives, especially if there's maybe some like trepidation or not understanding kind of how to start that journey. And then also Tom's point about it seemed, well, across the presentation, it seems like direct experience, getting trustees and museum professionals and the right people in to actually experience the studio seems to be a good starting point as well, but even how things like that might get started.
I would immediately say a studio visit. I think we see anyway a transformation when people actually come into Studio A. And I think your question about authorship, do you mean, Lisa, that an institution or a gallerist might have hesitation about whose authorship the work is if they're working in a supported studio?
Yeah.
I think that's a very resonant question for me coming from Australia. So I don't know if anyone is aware of the kind of, I guess it was a scandal that happened about 2 years in Australia, 2 years ago in Australia with APY galleries. Do you know anything about that, anyone? Oh, okay, there you go. You can correct me as I get this, if I recount it correctly. So APY Lands is a gallery that represents a lot of Indigenous art studios in Australia, and that's a big very successful art movement and a very, very high value art movement. And Indigenous people in Australia are some of the most marginalised and impoverished, and art has become a source of high income for some Indigenous people. And the National Gallery in Australia was doing a major show of work from the APY Lands Gallery, and there are many Indigenous art studios and galleries. APY Lands is probably the most high value. And anyway, a very conservative newspaper did a story saying that white arts workers were painting high proportions of the paintings. It was basically a scandal of white hands on black work. And so the conservative newspaper was trying to undermine the authorship of the paintings. The show ended up being essentially postponed, and there was a major investigation into the true authorship of the work. It was incredibly damaging for the Indigenous art sector, and it went on to be proved that it was really the Indigenous artists' work. And at the time, I thought, gosh, this has such resonance for supported studios and for very different sectors, but there are some alignments. And I think that can be, it's always in my mind that people will suspect that that art facilitators in Studio A are influencing the work. And what I say is that artists at Studio A make different work at Studio A to what they would make at home. And the work is influenced by Studio A, and the art an artist makes in any setting is influenced by the network around them. But I would also say that artists with intellectual disability have agency and have capacity to show consent, and that to suggest that an artist working in somewhere like Studio A doesn't have that capacity is to really undermine an artist with intellectual disability. And the life of a person with disability often involves, not often, receiving support is how we all live. We all live supported lives, but people with intellectual disability have more support needs. And so receiving support doesn't mean you can't have true authorship of a work. That's my very long-winded way of explaining my answer.
I'll talk about the idea of risk, because I know, Charlotte, you just talked about this had risk and our next risk. Everything we do has risk. And I think artists always take risk. And I think that working in a supported studio or living as a person with a disability, you're taking a risk every day you walk out onto the street. And I think that's why the field is so exciting, because we work with people who are willing to take risks, because for most of their life they didn't have a choice not to. And so I think they bring that kind of energy to the work. And I think that the successful partnerships are when there's an understanding that this is kind of how we operate. We're figuring it out as we go along. And I think that that's the same about relationships with institutions or with partners, that, how do you do it? Who the hell knows? There's really no book. What you have to do is really be a human being in the world and experience what's going on and what the considerations are. I don't like the word accommodation as much as I like consideration. What are the considerations? What should we consider? What does the person need? What are their considerations? What does the studio need? Where does the money go? All these kinds of things are considerations. And, just the best path forward.
Is this working?
Yeah.
I'm not really sure.
I was thinking, do you maybe just want to speak a little bit about like your entry point to working maybe with ActionSpace and Nnena, just sort of what that looked like and anything? Oh yeah.
I just wanted to say, because Rosia was amazing. That's what I want to say. But you spent, 9 months or more? Can't remember now. Well, you spent a long time discussing the potential of Nnena, and then you came and volunteered with us, and you went above and beyond, more than anything I expected, to kind of really understand her practice and really get to grips with it. Like, you did proper due diligence, and we were all so impressed. We wouldn't have sort of trusted you with Nnena's practice if you hadn't have done that. I think we've had other galleries interested who we felt had got some morally questionable elements to them, and you very much proved to us that your agenda was very different. And I think you said to me that you're on a mission to change the art world. Yeah. And I just was like, we found our woman. But so that's really important. But just to tie in with the whole thing of how I work with anybody, is just coming and being with us, talking to us, meeting the artists. We've had, I think, things that only a few things have gone wrong, really. And when things have gone wrong, it's because people have presumed and dived in without being careful and thoughtful. And there's a lot of presumptions. We had somebody visited last year who was doing a project with Nnena, who I said to them, before we start, you have to just come and visit her, come and meet her, come and talk to me. And they arrived and they'd done loads of research into how to communicate with autistic people. And they were saying, we could bring an iPad. We can, Nnena could talk to us with the iPad, and she could do this, she could do that. And it's like, that's not what Nnena does. So it is just that basic starting point, just getting to know somebody. And then through that, gradually over time, good stuff grows.
Yeah, no, I think time's really important, and I think that's getting to know an artist is the best part of my job. And I think, starting the artists I initially represented were people that I'd been at art school with, and so was friends with, and that really understanding an artist and understanding their work is like at the core, is really important to all of the relationships with every artist I represent. And I think that's why it was really important to me to get to know Nnena, and that would look different to how I get to know another artist, but that is true of all the artists I work with. Some of them want to WhatsApp me all day, every day, and some of them we'll sit down, we'll have a video call once a month, and some of them, I'll come to the studio and hang out. It's everyone is different, and my job is not to make artists' way of working fit into the commercial gallery, but for me to bend to how they want to communicate. And so, yeah, it's really a privilege. And I think that what you were saying about always having to adapt of kind of like you saying condition? What was the word you were using? Considerations, yeah. I think that's really important. And I think that because I've built my own gallery from a DIY space, that's always how we've navigated. But there are existing structures also in place, such as moral rights, that you have to you take as a template, right? And you use them to protect artists' rights. And yeah, that's. I'll make another anecdote. When I started out, there was, I think he's now the #1 of Art Review's Power 100, Ibrahim Mahama's work, massive canvases that were like installations, and there was a dealer that was essentially cutting them up into small pieces and selling them. And that dealer doesn't have a career anymore. So, like there are things that exist, and you understand that those are to protect artists' rights, and that all artists, whether they have limited verbal capabilities, or not, those rights are for everyone, Can
I add one more point?
Add two more.
I can add one more. It's also important to remember, as a lot of the artists move into the commercial art world or get representation, that not all artists want that, at least in the studios that I've worked in. And we have to respect that and feel that, at least in my view, that the studio is the core, or was the core part of creative growth, that it's a center for creativity, for personal growth and exploration, for communication, for self-realization, and that's the primary essence. Because of that, these objects get created, and some of those, once you get the object, you have to deal with, what do you do with it? Do you present it? Is it private? Is it for the artist? And some of the artists want their work to be private. And I think we have worked really hard to have the idea of being an artist in the studio to be very collegial and equal, so that it's not about who has a show and who doesn't, who wants that and who doesn't, and who's left out and who's left in. But being founded by artists as an art space, that kind of collective spirit is really important, I think, to how the studio continues to work.
Thank you. Maybe just following on that a little bit as well, slightly separately, coming back to this idea of maybe a studio visit, or thinking about, if there's a curator or a consultant sort of thinking and wanting to engage either with a specific artist or wants to start working with a supported studio, and maybe they're nervous, they don't know what language to use, or maybe they don't know how to make the introduction, maybe they're nervous about interacting with the artist. Are there any kind of, again, it's not every encounter is going to be different, but is there any sort of, I guess, considerations or kind of words of encouragement is the wrong word, but just sort of ways that people have a better entry point?
For me, I'm a very intuitive person, so there's always this gut about who I don't want to work with, and it's like, oh my God, I don't really want to work with you. And usually that's true. And, I like to say, like, if you're asking the question and it kind of comes out in the wrong way, but you can really feel that the person wants to learn, that's a relationship to have. Because I don't know, I learn every day. I make mistakes every day, and that's how I grow and learn. So are you going to be in that kind of relationship with somebody where you're going to explore together? And for me, that's right. You can correct someone on language. You can say this, not that. But, if they don't have the right intent, and then you get like the phone call, do you have a Black artist with a disability for the show I'm organizing? can you name one? Are you interested in any? Have you, like, you know, and you know you're not going to engage with that. But I think, you know, that's an extreme example because that's a real call. You know, that's an extreme example of what you don't want to deal with. And when you feel that, and people can be a little more polite about it, but you still feel that that's what their goal is, and that's something I don't engage with.
I can't remember what your first point was. Just going back to that, I suppose just following on from that, and I keep going back to my question that I answered, Michael, but it was working with people who you know have got weird agendas or is very, very uncomfortable, and it's not where we want to be. My job is to make sure that Nnena is the happiest person in the room, and I always call her a happy sausage. That's very, very important. And if you have anybody in the room that you're having to convince them that she's an artist or that her artwork is great, it's just not going to work, and it's uncomfortable for everybody. And I have been in that position. We've all been in that position at different times. So we very carefully handpicked who we're going to work with. We've been very strategic in how we work. So the Turner Prize was a bit of a shock because we were all just kind of lumped together. But actually, it was incredible. And the curators, Michael and Jill, were beautiful and wonderful. And you listened and you learned. And we all went on this incredible journey together. I mean, I think, you know, it's been phenomenal. And it could have so easily have backfired. It so easily could have done. And then just sort of to the earlier point about facilitation and being misunderstood. I mean, I think that was one of my key worries, was that when Nnena was nominated, that there was going to be lots of discussion about, is this her work? Is she really in control of her work, et cetera, et cetera. But it was fascinating because it didn't come up. I was kind of bracing myself for battle and having arguments about it with people, and it just wasn't there. People didn't ask that, and actually people really were looking at the work. There was lots of discussion around the work, which was incredible. So yeah, what else? You said something else, but I know obviously Gabriella needs to give a... Was there something else that you said that...
Just for the audio recording, yeah, what do you see a certain entry point, or I guess kind of following up to Tom's point, is there certain, if a curator or someone who wants to do a commission or someone who works in a museum is interested, maybe in broad terms, doesn't have a specific artist in mind, but also doesn't have an agenda in mind, thinking like, I'm interested in, you know, expanding, sorry, this is turning into a monumental question. I'm interested in expanding the totality of contemporary voices today. How should they start their journey? Is it just reaching out for a studio visit? Is there ways that seem to be kind of more impactful or better than others?
I don't know, it's just too much there, Lisa. I can't answer all of that. I mean, I think we're in this fascinating position after years of sort of desperately trying to get any opportunities for our artists. We're now obviously being inundated with offers, which is amazing, not just for Nnena, but the ripple effects are happening. That's really important to know, that times are changing, things are shifting, and there's lots of amazing curators out there who are really keen to expand practices. But God, my brain's gone. I can't remember what you said.
Can I add something in? I mean, I think if someone were to say to Tom, for instance, I'm interested in, what did you say, in expanding the totality of, I mean, probably if someone said it to me, I'd be like, but certainly if someone said it to Tom, I think you'd leave the room. I was saying to someone earlier today that when I first volunteered in this recreational art program, I had no experience with people with disability. And I remember wanting to be there, but feeling incredibly uncomfortable and feeling like I didn't know how to talk to people. I didn't know what people were saying. I didn't want to be rude. And I find that a really helpful, it's not an experience I'm proud of, but I also find it a really helpful experience. And when I see people who clearly feel uncomfortable coming into Studio A, I always reflect on that myself. And I think if a curator is interested in expanding the totality to whatever of contemporary art, a good first point is to to talk to someone like myself or someone like one of us in working in a supported studio. I think it's pretty straightforward. Like that's that's what we do. So we're the translators between the artist and again, I'm always reflecting on, not wanting to speak on behalf of an artist, but then I reflect on what Tom says to me, and he says, "Can you help me, Kylie?" He says, "I want to be an artist till I'm a very old man." And then he says, "I need some help here." And he says, "Can you help me, Kylie?" And so he's asking me to help him do be in the contemporary art world. So I'm not sure if that's a helpful answer or not, but
I'm not sure. Your point about studio visits, I'm not sure if that's always, those can be exhausting. Like if you work at a big studio and people want tours all day long, it's exhausting for the staff. It's exhausting and distracting for the artists. It's a lot of time and effort. It's not necessarily the best way. So I would say some kind of other conversation or research, or what's your objective curatorially, or if you want to develop a product, or if you want to study the center because you want to do one in your community, like why are you coming here? And I think that would help focus it, because when people come with just a really open-ended, I've always wanted to come here and I want to meet everybody. Everyone doesn't want to meet you, Some do and some don't, and it's and that's hard to negotiate all day long sometimes too.
I also think that it's like, look at the work. Like the question about agency, I get asked the most when someone's distracted at an art fair, not really looking at the work, focusing on an artist's identity. But whenever someone is stood there really looking at the work, you can so clearly see the authorship and the agency in that work, because the work is so powerful. And I think that how it was presented in Bradford just really allowed people to do that. And that's why we did have that nice surprise that those questions that you were like mentally preparing for weren't being asked, It's just like, and that can be the same for don't come to the studio all the time. Go and look at the work, and spend time with the work.
Yeah, I think it comes back to some of the
Yeah, I think we have had an awful lot of studio visits, and I'm almost ready to put a ban on them for 6 months. I think we're all a bit worn out. But we had the Tate team came, Linda Bell, the artist who's got the show opening on Saturday. The Tate team came, and Linda happened to be in a really vile mood that day. Nothing to do with the studio, other stuff was going on for her. But she just, it's that interesting thing where people come specifically because, in that case, they had a specific project they were offering Linda. She just wasn't having any of it. She has a very complex learning disability. She's completely deaf. She's nonverbal. I can't explain to Linda why those people have come. I can't explain to her that they're offering her a big opportunity. And she was in such a vile mood. And Linda loves activating her sculptures. It's part of her practice. And she actually, while they were there, threw her sculptures at me in a really angry way. And I think the team from Tate were lovely, but they were a bit like, what the hell? Because it kind of, on that moment, that looks like we're a terrible studio and we're forcing Linda to make art, and everything about it was awful. But, it's a little snapshot that even one studio visit isn't maybe going to be the right thing at the right time. And Nnena, just quickly, I think we've talked about this an awful lot, the kind of humanizing of disabled artists so that people have an inroad if they're feeling uncomfortable, because often it might be the first time they've had a really close encounter with someone with a complex disability. When people come to the studio, big things we talk about is music. We talk about nails, and Lisa and Rebecca, where are you, Rebecca? Always have amazing nails. So the three of them are always showing them off. These are like really basic but wonderful little connecting points that enable people to find a bit of common ground and have a giggle about before we talk about the big stuff, the art, which Nnena is not able to articulate her practice. She's not in a position to do that, but she can show off her nails and she can tell you what music she wants to listen to. And those things are really important.
And she can certainly dance. It is 4:30, so should we take one Two questions or comments from the audience. I'm so sorry this day has gone so incredibly fast. We'll start with Kate.
I have tried really hard to be really quiet during the day. It's been really wonderful. I'm Kate Adams. I'm co-founder and director of Project Artworks. And we, as a collective, were nominated for the Turner Prize in 21. And that, I think, came out of a process that was really supported by the Arts Council of curator tours to studios. And we, I think, in fact, one of the curators who came was on the jury that nominated us. And the thing is, what you're saying is it has a huge impact to visit a studio, because it makes something that if someone has never encountered someone with learning disability, and there are many, many people who haven't, then they're not necessarily going to understand what it means to make work and to have a studio and what support studios are for. That's the first thing. It was also, I think, part of, I think, we ran this program called Explorers for 7 years, and it was in order to have interactions with institutions and galleries, to open up difficult conversations, and also to enable galleries to understand where people were around them, where neurodivergent and learning disabled communities were around them, where they lived, how they lived. And so we would map the services around galleries, and then most importantly, to transcend descriptors or even the intellectualization of what the focus of the practice is, to bring the staff teams of galleries and institutions into creative encounters with people with learning disabilities from their locality, and to say these people live, these are your audiences and your community. And if you are in a creative interaction with someone who doesn't use any of the learnt modes of communication or social engagement, in fact, you are actually made quite vulnerable. And that vulnerability is where the understanding and the learning and the, I suppose, insight into other ways of being happens. And it's really, really important. And I think it helps curators to think about the content of what we're talking about, which has been part of art for centuries, which is communication, perception, insight, consciousness, unconsciousness. And that, I think, is really important to remember. And just one more thing, Lisa, because I really love Maria Luganis too. But I think this quote is perhaps really relevant, that through traveling to other people's worlds, we discover that there are worlds in which those who are the victims of arrogant perception are really subjects, lively beings, resistors, constructors of visions, even though in the mainstream construction they are animated only by the arrogant perceiver and are pliable, file available, classifiable.
Hi, my name's Martin Swan. I ran the Explorers program for Project Artworks, and I just wanted to say this has been fantastic. It's been really interesting, great to hear all the speakers. A really great event. But I think we have to deal with the elephant in the room, which is the lack of representation of learning disabled people in the room. And I just wonder whether that's something that you could talk about. And I mean, I understand the reasons why, but I think it's important that we don't not talk about it. So is that something that you could talk about, Lisa, and the panel?
Sure, I can talk about it. When I was planning it along with Cheryl at ActionSpace, I think because, as I mentioned in the beginning, I think the focus is really looking at the cultural intermediaries. You know, it's looking at the curators and the academics, and how we can be doing work better, as opposed to necessarily having the day focused on the actual practices of learning disabled artists, if that makes any sense. But certainly, they would be welcome.
Yeah, but can I just respond to that and say, if this was a symposium about queer artists and there were no queer people here, how would that look?
Sure.
And I think that's a really important thing, because there is a way of involving learning disabled people, and I'm not saying that this is what this event should have been, but we all know, I'm sure everyone here who works with the learning disabled and neurodivergent people would understand that there's a lot of opinions that learning disabled and neurodivergent people have that would be really relevant to all of these conversations, and not having them in this conversation feels a shame. That's all.
I understand. And part of the follow-up of this symposium will be ActionSpace hosting workshops with supported studios. But I do take your point.
Thank you. That's right.
I think that's what I really enjoyed about your presentation, actually, was the video at the end. I thought that was really important, actually.
I did travel. I mean, I would love to have presented with a Studio A artist, to be totally honest. I mean, there are some logistics of travel, but I did travel where I met Amanda to the College of Artists Associations conference in New York with Tom, and Tom and I co-presented, and I do think Tom added a lot of richness to the very academic conference. So,
I mean, I fully take your point, Martin, and I've not been involved with the organising of this, but I think I do take Lisa's point that this was a big focus on cultural intermediaries, and there were so many aspects of this. We could talk for many days, so we can plan another thing, can we not, with that is sort of richer and deeper and involves more people and more voices. I personally have found this super useful and quite a joyous event. And I know for the exhibition that Lisa's curated with Nnena and Rebecca, Super Trooper, that's part of Attack, Decay, Sustain, Release, which is at Stanley Picker, which I don't know if we're going to get a chance to go and have a look. You know, Lisa's made a huge effort to make sure that many voices have been involved with that. We've had ActionSpace artists going to visit and doing responses to Nnena's work, which was really important because ActionSpace artists weren't able to go to Bradford because it was too far. So for them to come and see her work in the gallery has been really important. And we've got a whole group coming on Saturday. So people are being included in this discussion. It just might not be visible right at this moment. Are we wrapping up? I've got a few lines from Cheryl, and so sad that Cheryl's not been able to be here today because she has been the driving force with Lisa for this. How do you want to do it, Lisa?
And I've just got a few thank yous.
Yeah, I'm just going to read out the email, I think, that she sent to me. So she'd like me to thank the speakers. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody. She's asked me to pick up on anything that was particularly pertinent. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to leave her. She said, the reason we developed the symposium with Lisa was to open discussion in the sector and make sure Nnena's TP win was not a one-off, but to continue pushing open the door she has opened and to make real change so that learning disabled artists across the UK are able to achieve their potential. We hope to give people insight into what was behind Nnena's win, the support needed, and also how possible it is. There are supported studios across the UK full of artists who are doing excellent work. At ActionSpace, we work with 70 artists on a weekly basis. Some are just looking to develop a private art practice, but a growing number of particularly younger artists are looking to become professional artists, working alongside and benefiting from the same opportunities as their non-disabled peers. We are achieving more and more successes and hope discussions like the one today will make even more possible. Oh, and then she says, give 2 examples. Yeah, yeah, thanks, Errol. And then just say, so Ian Warner, ActionSpace artist, did a major public art commission at the Unilever campus, which is just around the corner. And Flora, you still here, Flora? Flora's over there. Flora would be delighted, it says here, to take anybody who wants to see it on the way to the reception at Stanley Pickett Gallery. Are we all so late? Is the gallery now going to be shut? Going to keep it open, yay! So on the way to the gallery, if anybody would like to go with Flora to see Ian's Unilever permanent artwork that's on the wall there, that would be amazing. And that was done in collaboration with Stanley Pickett Gallery, wasn't it? That was our sort of first workings with you. Top team. And then I'm just going to say again, Linda Bell has got her installation that opens at, actually she said, interactive installation in the turbine hall, which isn't true. It's in the tanks. But let's pretend it's the Turbine Hall Commission. There we go. And then it says, then introduce Lisa.
I will be super, super quick because I know everybody is ready to get out of here. I just wanted to first announce, especially because everybody is here today, that the questions we've been discussing around sort of supported studios and cultural intermediaries and how to move forward will help shape critical studies in art, disability, and access, a new book series from Manchester University Press that I'll be co-editing with scholar and curator Amanda Caccia. It's very early days, but if anyone is interested in hearing more, or more importantly, potentially in the future, interested in a book proposal, you can reach out to me for more information or to Emma there. And then actually very similar to what Michael was talking about, at Stanley Pickett Gallery, I'd just like to mention this constellation document. It's a broadsheet archive I created with responses to Super Trooper. It draws, kind of draws on and puts some of this liminal practice into practice by gathering multiple responses from artists, writers, and curators. There's poetry, there's artwork, there's drawings, there's text. So do pick that up at the gallery. And then again, the insights shared today, these topics of risk, systems of care, structures of agency, visible location, representation, with my research will inform a toolkit of guiding principles for the contemporary art sector over the next year, and there will be follow-up studio sessions, part of that as well. So final thank yous. Again, thank you to all the panelists and to Peter and to Arts Council England, and also to Art Fund and Cranford Collection for Super Trooper. Thank you to the ActionSpace team, including Dan, Janice, Roisin, Flora, Gabby, and of course, Charlotte and Cheryl. Thank you to David and the Stanley Pickett team, Maddie, Jamie, Dennis, and a huge thanks to Faith, who is the logistical master person behind today. Thank you to Helen Potkin, who I think is left, but is my supervisor. And to Rebecca Cressley. I mean, to be honest, you know, this initiation of us all starting to work together has been so instrumental in shaping the direction of my research. And of course, the biggest thanks of all to Nnena Kalu. Her practice is influencing not only my work, but the art world and all of us in this room. Let's go to the gallery. Thank you.